issues and
Hmm.
um, you know stuff like that. And and because I mean, I've been to one of the I guess you would call them MNFL calls that Jim Tobias and Mark DeZelia
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
are, you know, and it seemed to me that people were sort of flailing about what it was that they really were trying to do and why.
Yeah.
Um, and so then I made a presentation about it inside the group with Mark, our own team, just to bring our people up to speed with what it is. And so this sort of grew out of that presentation. And again, it's just like a target of convenience because I needed to do this writing assignment.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, cool. Well, yeah. Well, I think certainly myself and Ed would love to give it a read through and see if we have any recommendations or things that we could
If you
propose.
think it could be helpful, reorient it and published as something else, or scrunched down and stuck into the implementation manual, or you
Hmm.
know, uh, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah. No, I
it
think
sounds like
that's
it
a
could
it's an
be
interesting point
right.
because we like in the past we've been focusing on facility registries as like the service that stores and shares a master facility list. The MFL being the data set,
Right.
and I think I think it's an interesting kind of like juxtaposition of like, well, how do you think about these two things, and how can you do them move forward with both of them at the same time, right? Because if you could create an MFL and store it in Excel or a Google spreadsheet or something like that, but does that really meet all your requirements of a registry within an HIE? Probably not. And how do you kind of address those in a coordinated and encompassing kind of way? So yeah, I think that it might be like a really nice artifact to include as part of like our implementation guide that I think you've already given a read through, and might help to kind of like frame both of those topics together.
Or maybe sort of like springboard off of it, or somehow,
Hmm.
or maybe it defines more features that you'd like to put into resource map.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
certainly. I think yeah, if there's requirements right that are being brought about that are like, hey, this isn't resolved by any facility registry tool. Um, those are really important things for us to one document what those requirements are, and to figure out well how best would we support that. So
I mean, because there are some things that I really like about resource map, and then there's some things that I really hate about it.
okay, what do you hate
Um,
about it? I'm curious about that.
um, that the data is still unstructured.
Yeah, depending on like how a user defines their collection, you mean?
Sort of like that. I mean, I haven't found, it might be there. I haven't found any way of like having different collections as different layers. It's like, or what exactly is going on there. But,
Hmm.
you know, as you'll see in the paper, I mean, like I really like the way resource map, you know, defines stuff,
Hmm.
the way you set up a layer
Yep.
and what you have available as tools. I
Hmm.
think the palette is really limited right now, and and it just seems to me that I haven't been enough into the code to know what's behind it, but it seems to me that if you could, you could easily define custom objects in terms of a XSD, or some kind of a JSON template, whatever you sort of wanted to do it, but and you don't even have to store the data for these custom objects in a database, right? You can actually use some powers of a NoSQL type database, you know, and basically just have have sort of a object store where the objects have structure, but the objects can be. At any rate, it seems like there's a lot of potential for growing that interface into a way of really designing a data entry tool that that's good for everything from sort of like surveys, to data calls, to inventories, stuff that you don't want to build from scratch, but you do want to control the data elements inside of it,
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think that was always the vision for Resource Map, was like a flexible tool that could be used in different scenarios. Yeah, anyway, maybe we could drill down on that, into like some of the specific, metadata that can be assigned to data elements, as well as how that can be transmitted over the different APIs. Certainly, like the Fred API is limited in that way. CSD has its own limitations and challenges with it too. But then there's also like the native JSON API and GeoJSON API. There's other ones out there too that provide more advanced functionality. I think that's common of any kind of web service type of tool that's out there now. But well, anyways, I see we had a Jim also join. Jim, welcome. How are you doing?
Thank you. Doing well.
Good to see you. Ed wanted me to just send his regards. He had a new family member join him this week. His wife or his girlfriend gave birth to a healthy baby girl, and he'll be on maternity leave for the next couple weeks and kind of in and out of contact. But I'll do my best to try to keep up appearances here in the meantime.
Okay, congratulations to him.
Yeah. Very, very exciting time. As with everybody, everyone likes to see a nice healthy kid. So, anyways, but one of the things that came up on one of our recent OHIE community group calls amongst the leadership team was a bit of a call to action to brainstorm how to grow each of our subcommunities. Are there opportunities or things that we could be looking at to engage with other key stakeholders in low-income countries that we're working in NGOs, government level, kind of some of the different strata and levels of engagement that we have. And so one of the things that I thought might be interesting is to do a bit of a brainstorming activity of who, in an ideal world, who would we want to be engaging with routinely? How is probably the best way to engage with them? And what are some maybe tangible ideas to try to carry that out? I certainly have my ideas, and I'm happy to share some of those initially, but I would love to kind of do that, as a bit of a group process to see if you guys have any other ideas or kind of key people that you think would be, excellent in our community, or, would bring a lot of value add or also benefit quite a bit, too, from our artifacts or community discussions and activities. That was kind of my one idea for the call today, but, certainly also I want to be able to, have it be an open call for any kind of burning issues you guys have or other things that you want to talk about as well. So any thoughts on, does that sound like a interesting topic to drill into a little bit of how we can engage with a broader spectrum, or are there other topics that any of you would like to focus on?
Well, I hope I can learn something from the conversation. I'm not sure how much I can contribute. I think I got involved in OpenHIE because people thought I might be good for architecture and standards and stuff, but this whole community aspect to it is I feel a bit out of my league, and I'm also trying to figure out some of the same questions for the HMIS community, how to grow it, where the boundaries might be, how can it best be useful. So Good question. I'm afraid I don't have much input for the answer, but good
Yeah,
question.
no, absolutely. I think that's fair. I think we're in a similar spot, right? There's always going to be like different subgroups of people interested in specific things. There's like, architecture and API experts. There's standards folks. There's going to be implementers who are like working at the country level, actually carrying these things out, and they all have different needs and interests, right? And how do we balance that as a community, but also try to provide artifacts or tools or venues for them to interface. I think is valuable. So maybe we can brainstorm some things and they'll translate across the different communities too, Jim.
Well, it seems like that at this point, well, like you say, there's 2 or 3 levels of people or different kinds of people. And when do you bring in, say, the implementers? Is it too soon for them? I mean, probably not, but would they want to participate at this point? Or and in some ministry level people, but you get the issue of design by a committee. If you get too many people involved too early, then you have the issue of maybe going off on a tangent, but that could be a good thing in the long run because diverse opinions are always good. Don't know, I'm just thinking out loud, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a little bit of like being the what's the term I guess I'm looking for? Like at some point, each of the sub communities in OHIE in a whole has to like identify, hey, here's the best practices and things that we really believe, and then as you bring more people into the group, a lot of times they'll of course have their own perspective or opinions, and that's great. Like I think that builds the community, but as long as you're able to do that kind of like around a common purpose and have like a bit of a a process just to ensure quality and that we're adhering to those mission, vision, and values that we were also working on the last couple of weeks too. So I think that a little bit of like as part of the OHIE leadership, that's like on us to help make sure that we enforce quality and make sure we're bringing like the best of breed solutions to bear and the best of breed kind of implementation guidance or architectural recommendations. But certainly people are welcome from all kinds of viewpoints and helping them to articulate their requirements and figure out, well, what does that mean in kind of the context that we're operating in and the resources we have is something that I'm really interested in doing, right? Because I think that makes for a healthier community and a healthier eventual solutions, right? Because you're basing technology on the people actually using it and what their requirements are. So, Larry, I have a question for you. Just like in terms of the, like the Sandbox group and the demo kind of work that you're doing, like who are some of the people that you're targeting for that work? Like who do you envision as like the main users of these, demo tools or Sandbox environment?
Well, it would be, I don't want to call it marketing because that's too commercial perhaps, but it would be the people we feel in the field that need to get a strong look at how it's laid out, what it does, how you can tweak it here and there. And so it's really not for the developers per se, but really for the more like the implementers and maybe ministry officials and so forth to look at the complete system as it's running, as it's put together today, and with the idea that they can probably, hopefully, see where it would go in the future. So as the demo Sandbox is what we feel is a good demo operational system to be used by many different people out in the field.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. And like, do you feel like say they're starting to engage with the Sandbox and they're like, oh, what is a facility registry? How do I do that? Or how do I even start to conceive of like what that means in my country's context? Are there do you think there'll be like follow-on opportunities through the Sandbox kind of environment to bring them into the facility registry community, and provide them with kind of like higher level insights or guidance from our community? Or how do you envision that happening?
Well, I would think that in the beginning at least, they would see the whole system running and try to do different things with it, and then maybe perhaps focus on the facility registry and what it does and what it doesn't do. And then at that point, they say, well, we would really like this to happen or this function to be included. And then hopefully they would be interested enough then to become part of the community to help shape the outcome of the registry. Or I guess that's the way I see it. It's a tool baseline to say, this is what we got, and if you don't, well, implied is if you don't really like what it does, then you have to become more vocal and more involved in the communities that are actually creating each part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Or is there some requirement that you have that's not fulfilled under the current schema, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think the whole area that you're touching on is really, I'm not sure we thought it out well enough, because would we need to, like something on the site itself for people to leave notes or to indicate how you should give suggestions or that kind of thing. I mean, I assume it wouldn't be good to be just a passive demo, and most people that would go to the trouble of running the demo are going to have pretty concrete items that they want to happen within the OpenHIE. So maybe we need to think more about that as a group, as the OHIE group. How should we be collecting suggestions for improvements?
Yeah, or like how do they learn more, or how do they engage further, right? I think that's a little bit of the kind of onboarding discussion that's going on amongst the leadership team too, right?
Right.
So I guess here's I had a couple ideas, right? Of like, somebody's interested in OHIE or some component of OHIE, and they're looking across different subcommunities trying to learn more. I think certainly things like doing like video demos, implementation guide, having meetings that are set up specifically for that kind of purpose. Once we hopefully see increased demand, would be really useful. Are there things outside of that you guys think could be of value, or there's like particular subgroups of people that might really benefit from a particular focus type of meeting or meetup or hackathon or connectathon or whatever it might be?
What about an FAQ?
Say a little bit more about that, Roger.
This would be aimed more at implementers to try and talk about common problem things like what do you do about mobile facilities? What do you do about community health workers? What do you do about the problem that I talk about of needing to keep substructure within the facility?
Yeah, I think that's great. I muted myself there for a second. So I think that's a great point, Roger. Like what are like those like sticking points or blockers that people run into? Maybe it's like a conceptual kind of blocker, or like an actual, hey, this is just not possible with the technology as it currently is, which would be like a requirement we would want to capture. How do you see like these FAQs playing out? Is this like a document that people can access online with like a little, quick description on how other countries have dealt with it, or is it more of like an interactive kind of conversation?
What popped into my mind was sort of an Ask Abby thing, but not so one-directional. I don't know if you see the Washington Post's version of Ask ask Abby. But their advice columnist, it's like she'll start out with like a letter from somebody,
Mhm.
and then she'll answer it, and then people will comment on it, so it'll form a thread. Okay, and so that's sort of what I would like to see, is to, you know, you know, Miguel in the Philippines writes, um, our health facility was destroyed in the uh, uh, typhoon. Um, we're rebuilding. Should we enter this as a new facility or not? Okay,
Mhm.
and then have some discussion. I think we would definitely have to seed it with some, either solicited or phony ones. Um,
Yeah,
you
they don't
know,
even have to be
think
phony.
of
I feel like we get a lot, but they're
think of
it's normally like on
discussions
a
that you've
one-on-one.
already had with
Mhm.
somebody, and you know, write up your discussion sort of in that way, and see if run it by them and ask them if it's okay. Maybe that's the way to
Mhm.
do something like that. Um, but it should be like really welcoming, right?
Mhm. Yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah, in the past I've thought of like uh, like some of like the online forums where people can like vote up and down issues and have and respond to like questions that people have, which is kind of like a similar concept, but it's like more crowdsourced and people can vote on what's actually interesting to them.
Oh yeah. So you
Um,
mean like like what's its name? Stack Overflow.
yeah, something similar to that. Yeah,
Um,
but perhaps that's like more complex than we need in like a if we're just systematizing it through our Google group and try to be intentional about bringing up topics through that that being probably our best forum to like distribute them to a larger group. I think that could work too.
I have a general question, I believe. How do we see most of the people interacting with the sandbox? It would seem to me that they wouldn't come, Miguel, as in the Philippines, as we're talking about. Would you see them coming directly to the OHIE sandbox, or would you see them through maybe an implementer or some other person who knows the OpenHIE and has engaged the Philippines in dialogue, and through that they would come? I guess it's a question of whether this is going to be a wide open, group coming in, or will it be channeled through several people who were quote implementers, or I'm not sure what to call the people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think like an implementer or like a technology group, right? There's normally those
Right.
kind of two categories in my mind, I guess. But yeah, I mean, how do you kind of see them or know? Hey, there is this interested person like fiddling with the sandbox environment. I think that's a great question, Larry. Like right now, I believe it's planned to be set up where it's just like all demo public user accounts, right?
Right.
I haven't
Right.
even found the sandbox yet.
It's kind of hidden. I think Larry might be able to give more detail, but they're still working on um, putting the final beautification
Yeah,
touches on it.
it's almost ready for prime time, but just not quite yet. We're still working on the client registry to get it right, and so it shouldn't be long though.
Yeah, I think we still owe you some facility registry things too, Larry. I need to check with
Yeah,
Martin, who is going to set it up. So,
yeah.
Something
um,
I've been wondering about in the context of the HMIS group is, and maybe this is a relevant question also for Instead. I know that DHIS has its own user community. We have a mailing list where we get questions and people answer and all that kind of stuff.
mhm.
And just trying to figure out what's the right relationship between all of this stuff which already exists and the OpenHIE community.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I think we've tried to keep them somewhat separate, probably to the detriment of this facility registry community, because people use Resource Map for all kinds of non-facility registry things, right? They want to track bed nets or do SMS alerts, and we also have a number of other tools that people probably would not care so much about the facility registry stuff when they're doing voice campaigns or SMS campaigns and that kind of thing. But I think we've tried to loop in people who are like, hey, this is like a pretty close thing to a facility registry that you're trying to do, or your project that you want to use X tool for could also benefit quite a bit from a facility registry, right? As like a a conceptual service that facilitates some other use case, right? And I think those are kind of like small ways to like seed the ideas of HIE and like a service oriented architecture and like that foundational pipes behind the scene that help do all kinds of interesting things, from supply chain tracking, or in kind of like the HMIS world, like aggregate indicator reporting, or other things that are involved there. I don't know, Jim, how have you been kind of thinking about it, or is it still like an open question?
Well, it's been kind of an open question, but what you said just now helps a bit, because like with your product, a lot of our users would use DHIS as a standalone thing, but maybe we should be more aware of the users who want to use it in collaboration with other things that are in the open HIE architecture, and pull them in. You want to get stuff from an EMR and share it. Well, maybe you should be part of these discussions, or from any of the other possible facilities. Yeah.
I think our like sniff test, if that makes sense, has always been around what are their requirements, right? And would this benefit them? There's no reason to like push technology for technology's sake. Like, I think OHIE is really cool, so I think you should engage in this community and consider these options, without foundational requirements behind the scene that would actually benefit them. Or hey, what you're describing to me that you want to do could really either benefit from some of the resources or artifacts or kind of concepts that OHIE is trying to share. And I think that's always been like our helpful kind of sniff test to figure out, is this something that would be helpful for them, or is this more of like a are we in some way like doing like a push model on them, as opposed to like what you're describing to me actually sounds like this would really benefit from OHIE.
Yeah, because the reality is there will continue to be many users who will just be interested in a single point product like Instat or DHIS. And that's fine. That's just not what this business is about.
Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of how we've been thinking about it. And certainly, like, the easier it is to conceive of one product within a larger context of an HIE is really a value, right? But yeah, certainly, like when interfacing with a client or a user, starting with their requirements and seeing where that goes, it has always been, I don't know, the healthiest way for us to proceed, I guess.
Sure.
But Jim, I have a question for you. So in our HMIS facility registry world, and I'm just like deaggregating actual products from like the conceptual components of HIE.
Okay.
Right. So if there is an HMIS component and there's a facility registry component, and you needed to draw a line between those things, right? That the HMIS component needs to consume facility data, or if there was something from the HMIS that the facility registry wanted to consume as well. There might be like opportunities to explore workflows there, right? Similar to how other subcommunities like the provider registry and the facility registry are also looking at workflows. Related to our conversation that we started here, I'm always like kind of wondering how can we, promote subgroups of people within our community, whether it's like kind of people more interested in architecture and standards and that type of thing, to help flush out workflows or identify them, as well as like local technology groups. Do you ever think like stuff like a connect-a-thon or a hackathon where we start to explore these things would ever be of value amongst either like our more internal leadership team at OHIE, or also country-driven like technology groups or technical stakeholders as well?
It might. I've been trying to learn more about where DHIS in general is positioned on that. So let me share some of that, because with you and with us and with all of these groups, it's always the the kind of matrix management thing about, we're user driven and also trying to do the interoperability thing and really looking for, I suppose, ideally the intersection of those two. What do we do for interoperability that is user driven? I think that the feedback I'm getting, the sense I'm getting from the DHIS team in general is where DHIS is deployed, there seems to be a reluctance to suggest a different tool as a facility manager. Just the complexity of that seems to, in the eyes of the people who are doing deployment of DHIS, seems to outweigh any potential benefits of that. So kind of where we are from the product position is, I think, a reluctance to invest a lot of effort in developing that interface where it's not something that we really recommend to clients. I hope I'm being blunt enough to get.
No, I think that's fair. I think it's a fair statement, right? So what if users were requesting it though? Like I think actually, Tanzania might be a really good example of that, right? Where they have a facility registry, they have an HMIS component, and ideally those things would interoperate with each other and work together.
I think at the end of the day, the user's boss, and if we hear from Tanzania that that's what they need, and it's an important customer for us. I think every customer is important for us.
Yeah.
Then maybe we'll be in a different situation.
Okay.
And yeah.
Well, I think it's something we want to explore, right? And I guess I don't necessarily mean to like drill down into like product and like individual groups, right? But like just conceptually within OHIE, like we have these components. They may need to share data, and specifically my question is like, well, how do we encourage groups, members within each community, right, to work together, and how do we kind of like build that nexus, right? And one idea is like, well, maybe we just get them all in the same room, like the technical geeks, and we say, hey, here's a challenge that we've identified is mutually beneficial based on user requirements, and something like a hackathon might be a useful venue to flush that out. And I was curious to see if
so that
that
was sort of
with
what
you.
I was directing my paper at. Actually, it's designed to hopefully try and lay out some of those issues.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. For example, the representation of facility level data inside DHIS is not very good. It's not, it's not well integrated with the other parts of DHIS, the reporting and the visualization stuff. You can store the information, but whether you can get it out is another story.
Yeah, but I think just one before I'll let you go on, Roger. But one quick thing is like I think it doesn't matter necessarily like countries will have components, right, that fill roles within like the OHIE construct,
right? And
we just want to figure out, well, every tool has its limitations and its strengths, and should be hopefully based on requirements of users. How do we help promote those to work better together, right? Separate of like
so
necessary
that was
tools.
So obviously, if what I just was talking about is extremely important to the country,
mm-hmm.
then they're not going to find, they're going to be disappointed or frustrated with DHIS2, right? And so there might be, assuming that they have, they might be looking for another product to replace DHIS2's facility registry and let, as a facility registry, and let DHIS2 update itself via the facility registry interface, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of examples of stuff like that where features will be important in one place and not so much in another. And DHIS has such a large suite of features that it's trying to maintain and improve that, there may be a space for more agile products to come in and do stuff that's of importance to people in a narrower community than the full D is. And that way we'll maybe sort of move naturally toward a
Yeah, I mean, I think you're
distributed view of these things.
you're describing like the classic like kind of service oriented architectural strategy in some ways, right? Where in some ways the more complex the system gets and the more it needs to work together, components break off and focus on like specific tasks and do them well and work well within other components, right? Separate from any tool, and I think that's part of the problem OHIE is trying to solve, right? Is that there's a lot of systems in countries, doesn't matter, you can name them anything, and they don't always work well together for a number of reasons related, from interoperability to just how they've been structured together, right? And we, to help really improve like health outcomes of people, we need to figure out a way to make them work together and work efficiently together. And I think that's when we talk about service-oriented kind of strategies, having a focused service that stores and supplies a facility list is one of those core components. And regardless of what tool that's done in, but we can certainly try to promote that in different ways. I don't know. I'm curious. Do you guys think like some kind of like meetup somewhere or a hackathon? Like, Larry, you're saying like the people who would be coming to the sandbox and starting to play with stuff. Maybe there's some way to figure out. Well, here's the people who are like particularly interested in the facility registry and how that connects to other systems. I don't know. Do you think getting those kind of people together and like having them start to get into the nuts and bolts and play together and learn from people who've done it before might be a valuable kind of exercise or meeting?
Yeah, I think so. But more than that, it occurs to me now as we talk about this that someone will probably come to the sandbox just for one particular item, say the facility registry or DHIS or whatever it is.
Definitely.
But seen in the context of the complete OpenHIE system, but their focus is really going to be on one element of that whole group. And it's and then we sort of get back to the idea of how do we start to capture the interest of all these diverse people coming in, and how would you, for example, what you were just talking about, getting a group together, how would you identify the people that would be interested in that kind of group and that kind of meetup?
Yeah, I think that's the problem we're trying to solve, right, Larry? Is like, who are these people? Where and when would they like to meet, and how can we encourage that?
Actually, I think that's what these discussions that are starting in the architecture meeting are. I think that we're going to discover that we have a lot of missing detail, and that we want to do some walkthroughs, right? Some sort of role plays. Do you ever use that? To sort of like animate messaging or something like that. Animate a workflow.
Totally.
I mean, I think that could be what this comes into, because there's always been this sort of like two-level discussion going on. One is like the sort of like the formal use of standard messages in standard ways, and the other is like the API methods, or the maybe API is the wrong word. It's like the service methods, so exposed services, a lower level at which these components can make stuff available. And I think what a lot of stuff that you're talking about, and the details that are going to end up having to be filled in the larger discussions, are at this second layer. What are the calls that the service has to respond to, and we're going to discover bunches of them, I think.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think you're kind of like, you're talking about like where the rubber meets the road, right? And I think CSD is like a pretty good example of that, where everyone's like, excited to hear about, oh, there's a way that's standards based and helps for a provider registry and a, facility registry to communicate where services are available. That's what I want. I think what the Connectathon showed us though is that the profile itself is a bit challenging, right? And it's early and it's messy and it's probably not ideal. It might not be what everyone would like to see in like the perfect world. And that there's challenges with actually making it work and making it go. And how do we one, iterate on that and really identify what those challenges are? I think that's where that kind of second tier conversation that you're mentioning, Roger, comes in. And I want to try to promote that to happen. Like how do we get that conversation occurring and robust and ongoing? So any ideas you guys have on helping to make that happen, I would love to explore, and that could be like meetings that we have where we like physically get people together and plug their computers in, or their, online interactive kind of things like a presentation or a YouTube video, or, somebody just talking through like how we've done it in other places. Or maybe there's something else that we're not thinking of. I don't know. I'm open to suggestions because I think OHIE is interested to really encourage these kinds of things to happen.
I think I've got something like that in that document that I did in Figure 4.
Okay.
I think that might be what you're talking about.
I don't have it in front of me. What's Figure 4 about?
So it like shows the MFL software as maintaining facility registry and service registry, but using the health worker registry and the terminology service, and the health worker registry used as a facility registry, and the
how those things can start to interact with each other. What is the master facility list tool? Is that the reconciliation tool that we've been working on, or is there something separate, or is that Promise?
No, that's just a general class of software.
Like to help people reconcile their facility lists, or?
Well, I think that's a desired functionality, but basically what we've talked about in OpenHIE is like the computer APIs, but we haven't talked about the human APIs. Okay, what are the functions? What functions do you have to package together in order to provide a usable tool for the user?
Yeah, this would be around like curation or governance of their master facilities.
Right, so it's like resource map is a master facility list maintenance software. Okay, DHIS2 is a master facility list maintenance software. I think that's like in the very first paragraph. Yeah, master facility list maintenance software is based on a facility registry, but it also includes a user interface, access control, and related features for maintaining the facility registry and using facility information for reporting and other purposes.
Yeah. I think certainly like there's always like that data entry point, right? For
exactly.
whoever is tasked with governing the facility lists and like doing data entry and cleaning and all that kind of stuff. Tanzania identified like kind of an interesting curation process where they had like a local group develop like a specific application to do that workflow that they had identified as required, where like somebody enters something, somebody then approves it. It goes through this kind of like little maze of arrows and processes that they wanted. And when it's like gets that final like check of approval, then it's like actually added to the master facility list in the facility registry, which is really like the facility registry is like that headless horse behind the scenes that just like provides services. And then there's like a series of user interfaces that can be customized or like other specific like localized services that countries might want. Maybe it's like a UI through their Ministry of Health website, or it's some kind of service.
I looked at that, I mean, and I talk about a merge tool, and I don't know how work is coming on the merge tool, but you know, the idea in that direction that's been floating around my head is that there ought to be room for um, uh, multiple facility registries, which are like subsets of facilities that are in some stage or other of the curation process. Okay, and whenever things get fully curated, then they get put into the real master facility list.
Yeah, I'd be interested to explore that more. I'm not sure. I want to hear. I'm actually curious to hear what Ed thinks about that, because he's a little bit more of like the architectural guru of our team at Instead. Certainly there could be multiple sources of facility data if like a country identifies that, hey, system A is like a trusted source, system B is a trusted source. But having that kind of like central authority for, the master list, so I can say, oh, hey, facility 4 in system 1 is the same as facility 6 in system 2, is obviously of extreme value. And how do you kind of standardize that, right? That's really what the MFL is about. So, I don't know.
Right.
Yep.
So hopefully I've captured some of that in this paper.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to giving it a read through, and Jim and Larry, you probably saw it. It was Jim sent it out, or Roger sent it out through the facility registry group. He's drafted a white paper
group and the HMIS group.
Okay, cool.
So
yeah. So
anybody who's anybody should receive it from that.
Yeah, I got it. Actually, I'm looking at Figure 4 now, and I don't know if this is time for a question, but
Sure.
You have the service registry as a separate entity from the facility and health worker. I didn't think there was such a, well, in the OpenHIE world anyway, a separate service registry.
There's the concept of the service, but it's nowhere talked about where it's stored.
Okay, so this is a conceptual diagram rather than an actual one. So
exactly. I mean, what I actually recommend is that the MFL also be the service registry. So the services appear, as part of the facilities, as associated with the facilities. But but somebody's got to compile a master list of what services, a typology of service delivery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we've seen that like high-level services have been captured in facility lists frequently, right? Like we provide HIV or surgical services, right?
Right.
There's also some context as well for like services that particular providers can give. So I am a thoracic surgeon, for example, and you know that I work at facility X from the hours of 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. or whatever it might be. That would be crazy hours, but
right. So I talk about that to some extent. I mean, it's like I think that some of that can't be harmonized or needs further harmonization. Mm-hmm. Okay, the stuff that's out there is really organized around the thoracic surgeon. Okay, but as far as the health system is concerned, the thoracic surgeon is not the issue.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, there could be use cases for a thoracic surgeon, right?
No,
you want to refer
use
to
cases for it, but I think there are and I'm all in favor of accommodating it, mm-hmm. but I think at the moment there's sort of like a certain amount of confusion. Like if you look at the Kenya MFL, right? So that's one that I also put in there. It's another diagram. But Kenya has like a radiology concept of a radiology service that exists at 3 different levels depending on how it's staffed and what types of capabilities they have there. Okay, mm-hmm. So regardless of who the provider is, you can make an appointment with radiology and get a service that's offered by a level 3 facility at any level 3 facility that you want to. So that's another sort of way of looking at the same issue.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I think I think that would be a great thing. Like, when we're talking about potential ways to like bring in more collaborators and more people, kind of into like the types of discussions that we would like to encourage in this community. That would be like a great one between the health worker registry community and our community of like, well, how do we start to really clarify like the types of data that are stored in each entity, how those can be shared across each other. CSD is one way, but there's other ways that we could explore too. Anyways, so we only have a few minutes left today, and I guess I just wanted to leave it open to any kind of like final questions or comments or like burning issues that you guys might have, or there's kind of like a number of also like pending deliverables that I think. Me personally, I want to focus on like wrapping up and getting to a finalized version 1. And I know a lot of you guys have already, given your feedback, and it's just kind of a matter of us trying to wrap that up. But anyways, I wanted to give a second to allow for any kind of like last questions or thoughts, or also if you guys don't have any of those, we could talk a little bit about, hey, how do we really want to prioritize, some of these artifacts or things that we want to produce as a community. Jim, I'll pick on you first. Any closing thoughts or particular artifacts that you would love to see the facility registry community kind of wrap up?
Nothing in particular. I think my interest of my angle of interest in this is mostly with regards to what does it mean for DHIS to be a facility registry provider, to just increase my knowledge in that and see what things might be relevant for us in that. I think our angle of interest is more on the provider side than the consumer side, really.
Okay, cool. One thing I might, like we were talking about today, is like identifying opportunities to increase collaboration and increase like community engagement amongst kind of the far-flung people who've liaised with us at one time. I might put together like some kind of like a little bit of like a list of, hey, here's ideas that we would love to see happen. We're not necessarily sure of the specifics of how or when. But I would like for us, like as a community, to have like that as something that we propose, to try to grow our engagement with stakeholders, both technical and implementation wise. And some of those things I think will cross over into the HMIS world, right? And I would love for your feedback on that if you have a second, or it seems like it would be of value to your guys' community too.
Sure.
Okay, cool. Larry, any closing thoughts or kind of deliverables that you think would be particularly of value to your work, or the Sandbox effort? Particularly around like how do we like draw that line from like somebody goes to the Sandbox, thinks it's awesome, wants to learn more. Where do they go? How do they do that, and how do we encourage it?
Yeah, but I'm still thinking about the service registry and how it pertains to both the facility registry and health worker registry. To me, it seems like both of those need a service component. You need what kind of services the facility has to offer, and then you need the provider who can actually provide that service. Mm-hmm. So it seems to me that whole area of where that lives and how it's communicated is a tricky business, because we're going actually between two communities to get that done, and I don't know if we've all thought through where would be the right place to put that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or is it like somehow like a little bit of both? It's probably important to know what providers can give services, right? And right. Because you could have like a hospital that does surgery, but all your surgeons were fired or transferred somewhere else, and well then you say you do surgery, but you don't have anyone who actually does that. So that's kind of like a important thing to know, probably, right? Anyways, maybe we could explore that a little bit on the Sandbox call, or one of the next architecture calls.
Okay,
cool. All right. Well, Roger, I don't know if you're still there. I see a ceiling. But any closing thoughts?
Sorry. I'm still here. I tend to use my screen in sort of a flat position.
That's okay. I was just checking. I didn't want to speak on deaf ears if you weren't there.
Right. Well, I guess it seems like we've been talking at this meta way about all the different discussions that we could have, and we really need to have someone write down a list of 12 discussions that we could have, and then send it around so we could vote and actually start having them, and try and have each one have some sort of a goal that we can solve in an hour at most. So I mean, that to me, I think that's what we need. I mean, I find these meetings really valuable, but I'm having trouble discerning, how they're going to concretize themselves.
Yeah, Roger, I agree. I think we want to get to like a bit of like a roadmap, right? With, here's like discussions we want to have, here's like kind of the prioritization of them, and have like artifacts and deliverables that come out of those, or activities, or like product, right? And I think that'll be really valuable for us to pursue. So maybe I can take it on myself to try to send around like that kind of draft roadmap or list of discussions and potential outputs. And I think that'll help guide us, right, in our future conversations, if that's helpful.
That would definitely be helpful.
Okay, cool. Well, I will take that on myself because there's already something I was working on. Ed and I have a draft of something together. We just wanted to do like a little bit more cleanup of it before we send it around to everybody.
Yeah, Scott, did you send out a Outlook reminder for this call? I don't have one.
I can let me check if you're on it. So we have a calendar event that has been set up. It's also on the. So there's kind of like two ways to get at it, Larry. You can either so if you go to the wiki page, there's a whole series of calendars. One of those is like the facility registry calendar. You can add that calendar to your client that you use. The other is that I can add you directly. Why don't I just add you directly so that you make sure you have it? But just for if someone else is like, hey, I want to get involved in facility registry stuff, they can either email me or they can just go to the wiki and add the calendar to their personal one.
Yeah, you send out the link just before the meeting, which is good, but I don't seem to have it on my calendar, and a couple times I know I schedule something at the wrong time.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, I just had the same problem with the HMIS group the other day, so I've put mine on my calendar. But if you want to merge the calendars as a way of doing the same thing, that's fine. Whatever,
Okay. Yeah. So you guys will probably see something pop into your email boxes now, just so you can see the repeating calendar event. It's a bit of like an unruly list. There's honestly like 200, 300 people on it, so it's hard to make sure everybody's on there sometimes. But definitely if you ever, if you think of other people who want to get on like kind of the routine calls and would like that calendar request, definitely let me know and I can add them. All right, guys. Well, I think we're a little bit over time here. I think we have a couple follow-up steps, most of which I'll try to summarize in like a quick email after this call, and we'll send out kind of like the the artifacts for people to review probably early next week, hopefully.
Super. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good afternoon, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.